Hello, everyone. We are live today on Thursday, April 9th, 2026. This is episode number 169. I've got it there on the bottom of the screen. You can find the episode page with related links at augforums.com/episode 169. This is a rare episode where there's already a link on that page. And that link is to a webinar that Laura, thank you for joining us today. Laura is doing on, actually, I need to pull up the date. It's April 21st at 9 a.m. Pacific time on Report Designer. Be about an hour long. And I've had this idea, Laura, to do this like for anyone who's doing a community presentation. There's a much bigger audience when you do something through Acumatica because they blast that out to all their customers. But it's also sometimes a little scary, or not scary, but just like you need motivation to prepare for it, right? So I thought I'd throw out the idea to you. Hey, do you want to just kind of like spitball and help you prepare for it? And it sounds like it's you like the idea, or tell me more about that.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Tim, because I kind of need that little push. The webinar's not for another 12 days, so I figured, I would just kick the can down the road a little bit. And then when you invited me to do this, I'm like, oh, I really ought to get my thoughts together. So thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your podcast. You do a great job. I am honored to be a part of it. And so, yeah, I have some thoughts, but I forgot to put my phone on mute there. Sorry.
No problem. I keep it informal on this. Yeah. Fire truck rolls down the street, dogs barking in the background, all par for the course.
So, but yeah, I have some thoughts for the agenda, and we can talk through that, but I'd love to hear some of your ideas too. The Report Designer is a really powerful tool. It's not always the star of the show.
I would say never the star of the show, right?
Never the star of the show. But I think that there are a lot of people out there who could benefit from learning some of the ins and outs. Some of the features are not documented quite as thoroughly as some of the other parts of Acumatica. So I'm trying to find some focus on the content that I think would be the most beneficial. And I did rewatch my own podcast yesterday in preparation for this, and just to try to make sure that I'm not going to duplicate. That was our introductory tutorial. So
you did one on the Acumatica community already a while ago, and I just realized I'll put that link on the episode page as well in case people want to. Yeah, so this makes it a little bit difficult. You gotta remember what you did.
Right. and I didn't remember
part two a little bit.
So yeah, in the first episode, the first webinar that we did, I had listed some similar topics, but due to time limitations, it really didn't get into some of the details on that. So the first webinar, we talked about how to get started, how to download the tool. It is still a tool that you do have to install separately. I was actually interested at the last summit. It was finally declared that the Report Designer isn't going away. They are building some additional capabilities into generic inquiries. And I think the idea is that eventually the Report Designer will be less used, but we know we still are going to need it for printed reports like forms, right? So
I didn't hear that update. So one thing I had heard a while ago is they were looking at taking the current desktop design experience and moving it into a browser experience.
I had heard that for years and years, and at the last summit, I don't remember which presentation, or if it was probably not on the main stage, but maybe it was at one of the technical sessions, but it was stated that it is not going away.
Oh, specifically the desktop experience.
It is still going to be a separate tool. They are working on a new capability in the generic inquiry that will allow you to group and collapse and expand sections within a grouping. I don't know if that's maybe for 2026 R2. There was a demo of it, and I can't remember where I saw it. It was at the summit.
Was that similar? Okay, I'm going to look at my notes on this.
Which is really cool. And that would be for some of your analytical kind of report designer reports, maybe. Still going to need the report designer though for forms.
Okay. Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I was actually hoping that they would not change that experience. And the reason is, actually Power BI does this the same way. You use a desktop app to design, then you publish up to web and users consume it on the web. That's exactly how Report Designer works. I like it because I just find desktop applications to be snappier. As soon as you go to web, like every little movement that you do is just slightly delayed. And if you are spending a lot of time in that tool, you notice it. I don't know. Is that your experience? Like, were you nervous about the talk about move to web?
I wouldn't say I was nervous, but curious, but definitely what you're saying is true in generic inquiry. Sometimes you can see that little pause when it's loading things. So I don't mind it the way it is. I know that some people maybe would like to use it on a Mac, or there's some limitations because of it being desktop.
Sure,
but for me it works. So we talked about that on the first webinar, and then we talked about how to start with an existing report, and we made some tweaks, pretty basic, how to save that back to the instance, how to give that a version, how to run it. Talked a little bit about things got a little fun when we added a chart.
You're the only person in the world that I know who was brave enough to ever try the chart.
Yeah, the chart. How did that go? Was exciting. It didn't look beautiful, but it was a chart. Yeah. So,
but it was a chart. You got a chart.
It was a chart. Yeah. So on this webinar, I was thinking I wanted to get a little bit deeper into sub-reports. Want to talk about groupings and show some more uses for formulas, how those can be leveraged. I have quite a few ideas. I don't know. Do you want to kind of talk through some of them one by one here? Or?
Sure. Before we do, I'm still trying to find the generic inquiry thing you mentioned, just because it popped into my head.
Yeah, I was kind of
give me a second.
I remember where I saw it. It was a demo. It may have been in a breakout session.
Probably wasn't main stage, but the thing I saw on the main stage made me wonder if this would become a GI feature eventually. Give me a second. Let's see if I can find it. I won't spend too long on this.
I think it's going to be released soon because they did show it working. It's probably a 2026 R2 feature.
Maybe it was this.
It was like a collapsible group, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's not this though. Well, let me show this anyways. Let me get this saved out. And then let me get this shared. It's kind of blurry. So this is probably not what you were talking about, but this was the modern customer portal. And if you notice how this is basically rows of data, but not just columns. So like it's 2 rows of data, but in the middle there, you'll see you have a document amount and a due date kind of displaying on top of each other. So when I saw this, I'm like, I wonder if, they're working on like more visual ways to control how a generic inquiry displays. And this, what you're talking about, sounds to me similar to that, in that you've got a grouping accordion type of function as well. So yeah, just making generic inquiries better. That seemed to be their focus for a long time. which it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other feature that I was expecting that they had mentioned previously was the ability to take a GI and then use that as a data source for the report designer. And I don't know if that's coming or not.
Oh, they didn't mention that. Oh,
But
interesting.
that would be a real game changer.
Oh, I agree
Because
with
right
you.
now you can export your GI and use that to start your schema in the report designer, but it's a copy. So
Right.
it's not linked.
And
So then if you
I don't think it can even do. Actually, I've never tried it. Have you ever tried? If you have a GI with sub GIs in it, if that's going to carry over?
I don't think that would carry
I
over.
don't think it would carry over either.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think so. And because you can't use a GI as a data source in Report Designer currently.
Right.
Another thing that doesn't come across when you do that is your formulas on your columns. Your results don't
Right.
come over,
Right.
so you kind of have to recreate those.
Yeah.
But yeah, but we talked about all of that. Exporting your GI to create your report schema is something that we talked about on the first webinar too. So
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link to that so people could catch up before the 21st. Okay. Well, that actually, I'm really glad to hear that. So I think generic inquiries get all the attention, and I think they should. There's just a lot of functionality there. Put pivot tables on top of it. I'm totally with you. It'd be nice to now make the step to allow generic inquiries to be a data source for Report Designer. But there's always going to be a place for Report Designer for, in my opinion, for the same reason that there's always going to be a place for paper. And as AI is now sucking us all even more into the digital world, I mean,
mm-hmm.
phones like sucked us into the digital world even more because it's a screen that's always with us. Now AI is just like sucking us even more from analog into digital. There's totally mental health implications of that. And I think there's also trust implications. Like, yeah, you just sometimes you just need that, like, that trusted physical non-digital representation of something. And because of that, I think that's why Report Designer sticks around. But it also sticks around for things like invoice formats, check formats. What are some other things where you think Report Designer will always stick around for?
Yeah, no, I would say definitely invoice formats and check formats are good examples. All of your printed forms, your purchase order forms. The other thing that comes to mind when you're talking about the printed copy, and it doesn't have to be printed, but we have an implementation we're working on right now, and we are trying to move them a little bit off of reports and towards dashboards. And it was pointed out by their management, we want to have that snapshot. Like, yeah, the dashboard is always current, but you don't always want it to be always current. Like you want to see what it was yesterday. So people like actually to have that report sometimes emailed to them.
Totally with you.
That's the report is something that you can email, especially with the new version of Acumatica. There's a new email notifications tab right on the report screen, and you can set up those schedules to send those out on a schedule. Sometimes those can be customer facing things too, where you can't send your customer. You don't want your customer in your system. We have a field service customer, and they have customers who want to see all of their appointments for the last week in a report every week. So
yeah, great example.
Yeah.
And even there, technically, you could probably bend the customer portal to make it do that. But it's one more username and password. A customer has to remember they have to log into your portal, but they'd rather just have it hit them in an email, especially like executives, salespeople. They like that because they don't like logging into systems, right? They live in their email.
Right.
Yeah, that ability to deliver on a schedule natively in Acumatica, something via email that's nicely formatted. I like that as well. Yeah, that's nice.
And one of the one of the topics that I did want to touch on in the upcoming webinar is hyperlinks. So you can make those reports more interactive. So if it's printed on a paper, you can't click it, but the reports can include hyperlinks that would take you back in if that user is someone who has an account in your system, if it's your employee, whatever. They can drill into a field on that report and pop right into Acumatica to get to the details.
All right, I'll be your note taker here. So I just started a list on the other half of my screen. Hyperlinks is something you wanted to touch on. I'm a huge fan of hyperlinks. The lowly hyperlink to me is like my favorite thing about a web-based app versus a desktop app, because a hyperlink allows you to take someone anywhere essentially, right?
Exactly.
So what your thought on hyperlinks? One would be like show them how to drill into a screen in Acumatica, and then maybe would you also do an example where they could drill out to something else, like a simple Google search or some.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, hadn't thought about that, but absolutely.
What were your thoughts on it though? Let me capture that first. Like drill to another report or record or what?
Drill to a record. So, okay. For example, if the as a profitability report, maybe you could pop into the sales order, take a look at that specific transaction.
So like a sales
but we could also, it could also open even a generic inquiry. So that's something we do see a lot in like a pivot table in Acumatica is kind of a nice, I digress, but in a pivot table, you can drill down to see the GI behind that number. If we have a summary report and we build a GI in Acumatica, then we can allow the user to click on that cell, and with the appropriate filters, we could open the data behind that.
I think you could also populate the parameter in the GI on the click. Do you remember?
So
on the
hyperlink in Acumatica in the report designer, there's a couple ways to configure it. You can configure it. It can be either client or server side. If you set it up server side, I think it lets you, you can drill into another report. So it has the ability to open a second report and pass parameters to that. But you can also just build your URL as a string.
And I think that's where you could
since everything in Acumatica takes, does a GI have parameters in the?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
GI parameters in the URL.
Yeah, that's what
I'm not sure, so I might be lying here. But anyways, I haven't. To be honest, the example I had built out was a lot simpler. It was just going to open a detail record.
Well, yeah, I'm just here geeking out.
I can't promise if we're going to do this in the.
You're going to do maybe half of this stuff. Yeah, no problem.
We'll see.
Here, I'm going to hunt for it. While I do, I'm putting Caden's comment up on the screen. We actually got a live comment here.
You can also use a custom SQL view as a data source.
Good point on that.
Oh, yes, you can. Right. So if you anything that's a data access class. So yeah, that's cool, Caden. Yep.
And I know I've talked with you about this before. Like, I'm still a fan of SQL views in Acumatica. For you like that you can now use a GI and another GI. But like we said, you can't yet use that in Report Designer. So I'm just curious, for your standpoint, how often do you find yourself reaching for SQL views? Is it less these days, or do you still reach for them sometimes?
Pretty rare.
Okay.
We have some, but the only use case that I use regularly on that has to do with manufacturing and kind of expanding the bill of material, blowing through that BOM. Haven't found a way to do that yet in
that kind of recursive
in a GI. Yeah, but
that makes sense.
And sometimes we'll create a custom table, and then obviously that's a custom DAC. But no, for standard inquiries, really almost never create a SQL view. Pretty rare.
I was curious on that. No, that's interesting insight, especially being someone who can do it. I was curious if you find yourself actually doing it.
Yeah. So another,
Yeah, I'm going to skip that parameter. I can't find it. So yeah, maybe
that's
you
okay.
can pass parameters in a generic inquiry, but yeah, hyperlinks in general, super powerful. What other things were you thinking? Oh, you know what? I'm going to put up on the screen here. Here was what I got when I registered for the webinar that's coming up on, there it is at the top, April 24th.
Oh, yeah. No, that's great. That'll help. So we could just kind of talk through those.
Yeah, I'll help you out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's the next thing you're thinking of?
Embedding subreports. So we did touch on subreports. The chart that I showed was a subreport in the first webinar. But I'd like to show some more examples. There's some gotchas with subreports. Subreports, though, I think are really key in the report designer, and you would know this being kind of a data wonk. But when you have multiple details that you want to display, like a key example that I'll probably talk about in the webinar is a production ticket for a manufacturing company, right? And on that ticket, you have like a router, but Acumatica calls it a production ticket. So you want to show for the operation, you need to show all the materials that are on the operation, but you can also have steps. There can be 10 materials and there could be 10 steps. And there could be tools, there could be all kinds of details that are associated with that one operation, right? So the way that Report Designer works, just like Crystal Reports or SSRS or any report designer, basically, but it's all based on a data query. And if you try to join multiple detail sections in your schema, you're going to end up with duplicates and it's going to be messy. You can do it if you group properly sometimes, but basically,
yeah, sometimes, not all the time. Yeah,
right. There are some tricks, ways to do that. I don't want to digress on that, but
and to me, visually, the way I think about it is, okay, I'm looking at a record, a production order. In your case, it's one record, and then I need to look at, there could be 5 steps, there could be 3 materials, there could be 7 tools, and because each one of these little tables on the screen has a different number of rows, that I can't just tie them all up to the main record. They got to be separate things. So your subreports would be, each one of the things would be a separate thing with their own query. That way they could have whatever number of rows they have. My main issue though with subreports is that they can run pretty slowly because it all depends on the report, the data, etc. But basically every record's running, and then it's running the subreports for that record. Then it goes to the next record, runs the subreports. So you just have to be careful speed wise. Is that your experience?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It definitely can cause some performance considerations. So you want to make sure that you're making your subreports also as simple as you can. So if you're just looking at steps on a operation, you want to just include the smallest number of tables. Sometimes people copy the main report and make the subreport and has all the same joins in it, and then it can be a lot of overhead. And then you want to make sure that your parameters match exactly and are passed through. So there's some
for the same reason, right? That you want to make sure you're only retrieving just
that one work order and that one operation, right? You don't want to pull everything in the subreport, just what you need. And then 2, the subreport, another tip on the subreports is that they will expand on your main report, and they can expand beyond the size of the control that you've dropped on your main report. And if they expand, then they will make other things on your report disappear.
So if I drop a subreport here and I had some other things on my main report here,
there's something to the right.
I might even line up with this thing over here. If this thing grows, it's going to knock this down, which, okay.
Gotcha, yeah, they don't just grow down, they grow to the right. And if there's another control to the right, it can disappear. I can't tell you how many hours have been spent trying to figure out why the data is gone. And it's oftentimes the subreport has
And it might not even happen in the initial pass, right? You might think with the data that you tested on, it's fine. And then someone goes and uses it in the real world. And it might not even happen for like a couple months. Then they come back and they're like, why is it looking all weird? It's that kind of situation, right?
Well, usually it can dynamically grow vertically, but horizontally, I think it really has more to do with just the sizing of the controls in your sub-report. Maybe grow wasn't the right term. It will expand to the size that it is.
Like
even
a cancer.
Even if you've only allotted it an inch, if it wants to be 2 inches, it will do that.
It doesn't stay in its lane.
So we'll talk about sub-reports. So, and actually sub-reports kind of veers into another topic, which is maybe 2 down there. Complex.
Did you hit sub-reports on the first webinar at all, or no?
We did have a sub-report. The chart was a sub-report.
Oh, right. Okay.
But so I'm going to show how the parameters are configured because we didn't have time to really drill into that. Look at the collection and how those parameters get passed through, and maybe some tips like size considerations and what should be visible on your sub-report, right? So the sub-report can have all the same sections that you have on your main report, but you have to be aware the page headers and footers aren't displayed when it's embedded on the main report. So if you have footers, you're going to want to put those into the group footer or headers. A lot of times on a sub-report, you could use it to display details like we were talking about with the work order example. But another use for a sub-report sometimes can be just to pull one number. So like, for example, there was a question on the community board a couple of weeks ago. Someone was working on a report and they were trying to pull together 2 different numbers for each salesperson. I don't remember what they were, but like a booking and a invoiced, I think it was. So how much was booked that month and how much was invoiced, and the bookings comes from SO order and the invoice comes from, AR Tran or whatever.
Yep.
So they wanted to pull it together on one report. Could you do that in the schema? I mean, yeah, probably, but it gets kind of wonky. Yep. So what you could do is build a sub-report for one of those numbers, and then you just display just the one number. So your parameters would be the salesperson and the date range. And then in your report, you would probably just put that number into the report footer or the group footer, but probably just the report footer, since you're just going to call the sub-report for one salesperson at a time. And then you can just display that number in your main report. So then question is, can you access that number in the main report if you want to do some math? And you can. There's a formula for that. So if you preface the control name of your sub-report, so if your sub-report is called sub-report 1, and in your sub-report you need to create a variable with a number, with any number that you want to be able to access from the main report. But if you do that, then you can use that. You can display the value in the main report, and then you can also use it in the main report if you want to take the difference, say, between those 2 numbers on the main report. You can access that value.
I think that one would be a great example of the salesperson one that you said specifically, because I think I've reached for sub-reports probably mostly in that situation where I don't even need a report or a control. I just need a value. Mm-hmm. But the value needs to go off and do some independent calculation. And so, like you're saying, my main report's got the salespeople listed like in the detail section, and then I'm just doing sub-report field, and then you want another field that just does this minus this. That'd be a great example, in my opinion. Yeah, that'd be a really cool one.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was thinking of doing that. So I think I appreciate your input, and I will probably show that. It's important.
I'm taking my notes on it. So we're saying like 2 sub-reports. I'll hand these off to you. One would be like bookings, and one would be orders booked and
And
invoice.
dollars invoiced, right?
Yeah, dollars booked. Okay.
And it might not be the same records, right? So you might have a booking from 2 months ago and now it's invoiced this month. So,
Yep.
it's not, we don't want to join the specific sales orders to see if they were invoiced. We just want to get the total amount, invoiced for the period for that salesperson, right? And the total amount booked for that same period in this example. So that way we know we can't really do it easily in one query, or we're going to say we can't.
I think it's a great example. I love that one. Yep. Perfect. I mean, and you could probably spend, so like the hard part is deciding, it's not coming up with things you want to show. It's deciding what to do in an hour. Right.
Well,
so, I mean,
yeah,
that
there's so much.
Could probably take 15, 20 minutes just to show that example, I would think. Right.
I mean, it definitely could. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll probably pre-build it mostly and,
Okay.
Maybe make a few tweaks in real time.
Gotcha.
To avoid unintended issues.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, I love that one. Sub-reports. What else? You had grouping and aggregation.
Yeah, so grouping is kind of related, but I just wanted to show some of the capabilities in the formula builder. There's some interesting, like some would be aggregation. Yeah, so we're going to group. We can group dynamically. A lot of the standard reports in Acumatica are really great examples. I was looking at the AR aging report the other day, just trying to find some examples that I might start with in the real world examples that we can show easily without me reinventing the wheel. So it turns out the AR aging report has a little checkbox on it when you run it out of the box, and it allows you to specify if you want to group by parent account or not. And then on the grouping, so in the report designer, you have a collection of groupings. You can create any number and level of groupings that you want. And you can group on a field, but you can also group on a formula. So you could use your parameter, the checkbox where the user specifies if they want to group at that level or not. And you can use that to dynamically group so that you don't have to change the report. You can use one report for both use cases. I want to group by parent account or I don't. And you use one report and then group dynamically. But see now, Tim, I feel like I'm getting too far in the weeds. So you have to set me straight here. You're like, nobody cares.
That one's not landing as
it's not landing, so I'm probably not going to show that. But
no, it could if we had a good what's another use case for it though?
Well, another use case is I did this for a client once. It's probably kind of silly, but we had purchase orders. I think these are out of the box reports, but we had tweaked it and we had open lines. And sometimes they wanted to group it by the vendor and sometimes by the item. And you could actually do both in one report if you structure it.
Or the example I'm thinking of, which I think is probably the most popular one, is sales profitability. So out of the box, you've got 6 or so sales profitability reports that are all just grouping by different things. And you could show how to take 2 of those sales profitability reports and turn them into one. And in theory, you could do it with all 6, but I don't know, you could do something like that as well.
I don't think I'm going to show this. I don't think I'm going to show it, but we'll keep going.
I'm still writing it down so you can chew on it. Go ahead while I'm writing it down.
Yeah. So another, I kind of skipping over grouping and aggregation. I guess I'm going to talk about formulas for a second here. Did you know that there's a function called next that you can use? Next and please?
I have seen that. Yes.
Yeah.
That only works in grouping situations, though, I think, right?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, it works in the detail section.
I think it works in detail too. And there's a standard report that uses it, which is how I found out about it.
The best way to learn stuff, right, is looking at the standard stuff.
So it's called, the standard report is, I think, called item labels or something like that. and it's columnar, so it prints 2 labels across.
Okay.
And so normally you couldn't do that, right? Because in the detail section, you just can see one row at a time. But with next, you can see the next record. And then in order to not repeat, you like print every other row basically. So on one with visibility, you print 2 records at a time, and then you skip. So it's kind of like the same. I showed on the first webinar how you can do alternating colors.
Yeah.
By making 2 sections where one is, say, white and one is gray, right? And then you keep track. Am I on row 1 or, even odd, and print one section or the other section. So in this example,
use the mod function for that.
Yeah, use the mod. Yeah, right. So you basically keep a counter, a variable that's your counter, and then do a mod. So you'd find out, if you're on row 1 or row 2. And then you can hide or unhide the color, the colored section.
That's a good
but example. In this case, we already showed that on the first webinar, but in this example, we just would skip every other row because we're going to print 2 at a time. So it lets you print across. Another use.
And the nice thing there is all you do is show the report that's already built.
Yeah, we can just show the report that's already there. But some, I've also used the next function sometimes to know when you're at the end of a group. So you could tell that you're on the last record in the group. If the next is different than what you're on. So, which you can also do with, you have your footers, but sometimes there's certain things you want to show or not show based on whether you're on the last record.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's that.
So we're talking about grouping formulas. I don't remember this off the top of my head. I don't know if you do. I don't remember if there were any hidden ones. Like specifically, I don't remember if there's both account and account distinct. Do you remember?
I do remember. There is not account distinct. I
thought there was something about
there that. There is not account distinct, which is.
And you don't have a secret way of doing it, right? Because there was some.
Well, there is the secret way of doing it is to add a group and count as you go. So, but it's awkward because so like if you want to count how many distinct customers bought a specific item, right? And you're looking at your sales order detail. If you sort it by customer, then you can create a variable and increment it each time you hit the customer header. But problem is then your data is sorted in that order. So then if you wanted it sorted a different way, it's not so easy. So subreports, do it in a subreport. But yeah, it's a challenge. And in another, maybe a way to do this, Tim. I'm just going to ask you because I have not found it. Is a way to sort in the report designer based on the aggregate total. So like if I want to show my top 10 customers, I can print the sum, customer name and the sum. But
can you put the sum? Can you put an aggregate total in the grouping? I don't remember that.
You can put an aggregate total in the. Oh no, you can't. No, you can't. That's the. You can only put the data field. You can't sort on an aggregate total. At least I haven't found a way to do that. If I
So you don't think, oh, it's been a while since I've looked at.
Yeah, so I did a report
You
like
put
this for
an aggregate formula in the group formula itself?
not
Sure.
that I'm aware, but maybe someone smarter than me knows how to do that. I don't
Yeah.
think
Where I get
I
blurry
don't
is
think you can sort on the aggregate total. So when I had to do that, like it's not so bad if you need to pick like the top 3. You can just use some variables and do when you hit one that's bigger, you set it to the next thing. But I've not found a clean way to sort on aggregate totals in the report designer. That's
and
one
that's a big one, right? I mean, like if I want to just see top 5 customers, something like that.
You're better off with a dashboard if you want to do that. You can do a pivot and do it in a pivot or some, but yeah, it doesn't work that well in the report designer.
Okay.
Have you used, or do you think that it would be worthwhile to talk about processing order? You know what? Are you familiar with processing order in the report designer? It's kind of like in Crystal, while reading, while printing.
Oh, while read versus while print.
Yeah, right. So it's actually
I only
really,
report on page numbers if I remember.
yeah. So page numbers that's a really good example, because if you notice in the page footer section by default, it's always set to always. And that's because it needs to know page 1 of. In order to get the of, it has to make a pass through the data once to know how many pages there are going to be. So if you
create that situation, do you find yourself reaching for it? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's useful if you want to print do certain calculations at the top of the report sometimes. So I believe you can do a sum in a header section, even without the process order. But there are some scenarios where the data, well, if you're using variables would be an example, and you can set a processing order on the variable. So let's say you want to count how many unique, I'm trying to think of a good example for a variable that you would calculate. There's many, but I'll just use unique customers, I guess. So you can't count unique in a formula. So you have to run through the data to find out how many unique customers you have. And then let's say that you wanted to print that at the top of the report. It's not a great example. It actually comes up a lot in the questions on the community.
Does it really?
Yeah, processing order where you're trying to use a value earlier than it's been calculated. Basically. So you kind of get 2 passes through the data. I need to think of a better
example. I haven't encountered that a lot, but if the community questions way better than I do. Yeah. Okay. No, that's great reason to show it then. So basically, showing a total on the top instead of on the bottom.
Yeah, which I think in a simple case, you can just use a sum in the group header or the report header. But if it's a calculation, like a sub-report that's pulling that data, there are some scenarios where you'd want to calculate it earlier.
Or like your total customers in the report example, you'd probably want to do that in the report header instead of a group, right? Although
you might want to show that in the header. If you
create like a dummy group to do that.
Could do that.
Just like a group on a formula where the formula is equals 1 or something like that. Then you wind up with like a master group that essentially replaces your report header.
Right. You could.
Right? Would that work? Then it'd say, because the other thing that it gets expensive when you start doing stuff like that, because it almost has to do 2 passes. It has to do a pass and then it does the pass again.
Well, it does 2 passes anyways. I think it always goes through twice.
No, I mean, you think you don't? to do that calculation though, of like, let me find out how many customers are in this report up on the top. That's going to be more expensive if you try to do that calculation than if you didn't do the calculation at all. It's always going to do the wild red and the wild print, but I think it's going to be kind of expensive to do that calculation on the top instead of if you just did a dummy group, then you could just, but you don't have count distinct.
Yeah, you don't have count distinct. Yeah, no, I don't think it would cost any more to do it at the top, because you could just just put your variable and it would run through, and then you just print it at the top. You're going to go through the data anyways. But,
what we are hitting on right now, though, to me is the most important thing about Report Designer, and that is, and I've thought about trying to design a course on Report Designer. I've done one on generic inquiries. I'm going to do one on Power BI. But Report Designer to me is so tricky because I've never counted all of the properties and options. I'm going to guess there's 200 or so. But it's like, how do I show the 100 that are most relevant for real world scenarios? Because there's we're getting into it right here. Like
some of them I don't honestly know what they do. I really don't. So I don't know. Like well, let me just go through a couple real quick things that are on this list. So for images and barcodes, we talked about hyperlinks. So images and barcodes are really pretty easy. But one interesting use case for images that I've played with a little bit for certain scenarios is to pull in an image from a file that's in Acumatica. Not just, we can put the logo. So that's kind of like the example. But like if you have a product image that's attached to a product and you want to print that in the report, you can actually do that as long as it's an image file. You can't print a PDF, but if it's a PNG or JPEG or something, and you have a naming convention so that you know which files to grab, you can configure your joins in such a way and print those images embedded in the report.
You remember how that works if there's multiple? So this would be like on a stock item. If there's multiple files attached to the stock item, how it knows which one to grab? Do you remember?
Well, it wouldn't know unless you made a naming convention, or you could print them all. But
naming convention. Okay.
Yeah, but you could look for so you join. There's a couple tables to get there, but I think you go first to file something, and then from there you get to the file revision. I can't remember the names of the table.
No, I'm with you.
But then you can filter it. So you can filter it by, the extension would be like, so you only grab images like PNG or whatever, but you could also look at the file name. So it could be like, for example,
I forgot about that. But you're right.
Drawing or whatever. If you had a drawing that went with a particular project, and you always on the sales order acknowledgement, you always wanted to attach the drawing, and you agreed it would always be called drawing or start with drawing, you could find that image and you could embed it on the report. So
what this reminded me of, I'll put a link on the episode page, ogforums.com/episode 169, about a LinkedIn post I did because I was trying to remember how to do this, or if it's possible, like collecting backup for billing, especially in a construction situation. But there's other use cases as well where, essentially I want to drop file attachments on a report, whether it's an invoice or whatever. And I forgot about that you can go out and retrieve attachments, but the main issue is that you can't do PDFs, and a lot of the documentation, the backup at least, is PDFs. So
right. So for that scenario, you would need something else. I think Velixa, something maybe, or there's some other options for that. But this would only work with images. But still, it could be
still a cool one. I think it's a cool one.
Yeah, could be used to embed product images. Usually your product images are going to be images. So for a quote or a something like that, where you wanted to put a stock image on your stock item, or even on a sales order detail line, anywhere that you have an attachment, you could pull that in. Are there other properties that you find interesting, or would
Well, barcodes, I
the
think you should
audience?
definitely do the barcode one. I think that's a slam dunk. People want to know that. And to me, barcodes, like, there's just so many. Ken, going back to my world of, I don't think paper ever goes away, and paper is just so reliable. And there's just certain things like a traveler through a manufacturing warehouse. I just think the paper with barcodes is still a great way to process stuff in the physical world. What I don't like it is when people start writing notes on it, because now I need to capture that stuff. But if you're just scanning barcodes, I like that. Like, do you have any good use cases? To me, it's about the use cases.
Well, what I was going to say is that you don't even need the paper to do that. We have customers that uses an iPad on the shop floor, and they just pull up that traveler and they just scan the barcode off that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. You can have a side panel on your screen, your inquiry, and you open up the side panel, and that's your traveler. So they're just clicking on the row, and there it is. And then they can use that to clock on and off a job, or to scan materials, anything. Barcodes are really important for both those applications, I would say, for tracking on the shop floor, especially, and receiving. And
yep, I agree. Yeah,
about
anything in the
anything,
warehouse.
really. And they're super easy to do with the Report Designer. You can just.
I think that's a good one to show, just because a lot of people don't know. It's just too scary, right? They don't know what options to pick. But once you show them, it's like, oh, now this isn't something that takes an hour to set up once you actually show it, right? I think that's a huge win right there to show that one.
The other thing that I think I alluded to it on the first webinar, but I think it might be underused, really, is the report template that lets you change colors and styles across reports.
Yeah.
So if your company has a color theme, and you want all of your reports to be highlighted instead of blue in a different color, you can change that in the template report, which you save to your instance, and then it'll automatically make those changes, as long as all of your reports use that template.
So here's a good, like, authoritative best practice one. So I think out of the box, the two main ones are template report and template something else. Do you remember? Form?
Yeah, I forget what the other one is called, but yeah, there are two. Yeah.
It might be template form. One's for like internal stuff. I think that's template report. And what I think might be template form is like for external stuff, sales orders, invoices, things like that, right? And I think a good, like, you just sort of set the tone in the community. You could be like, I bet what I suggest is like template my company or something like that, where one, you're setting the tone that you could do a new template so you don't mess with the out of the box ones. But is that what you think, or no?
Yeah, no, I do think that it's good to give it your own name, because you never know when an update comes through, if Acumatica has a rebranding and changes their color from
right
blue to purple, and suddenly your custom template gets overwritten with the new default. You might be surprised. So definitely would be a good practice. You would have to go through all of the standard reports then and change them to use your new template. Another thing, and I don't know if I'll mention it on the webinar, but a lot of the standard reports use the paper size A4.
Yes, that's a good one to mention, actually.
There's some things, the A4 paper size, and then when you print that, sometimes that, depending on the sequence of operations to push that out to PDF, it can sometimes force it to create extra pages.
Yep. Yeah. Acumatica's non-US engineering roots show that right there, where it's
Yeah.
A4. A4 is basically legal size or
Yeah,
closer
it's
to
a little
legal
taller, a little
than the letter
skinnier.
size. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Other thing we change a lot in the standard templates has to do with the or the standard report forms has to do with the email templates. So they're all configured. Things like the sales order acknowledgement have the email template information embedded in the report instead of using the template that's saved inside of Acumatica. But you can correct that by taking that information off the mail properties in the report and replacing instead inserting the template name, and then it will take the information from the template. But if you
Yes.
don't do
Yeah.
that, then you'll
Yeah.
have two different places to maintain the verbiage for your.
Yeah. I've also noticed, I mean, you could spend a good 10, 15 minutes on this. I've also noticed that there can be a difference if you print the report with like reports and report off the screen versus off a processing screen where you call the report with an action, because one can go through the email templates process, the other cannot. That
Right.
might be worth
Yeah,
mentioning as well.
right. So when you click the send button from the preview, it uses the information that's saved in the report. But if you do it as an automation, it uses the information that's saved in the template inside of Acumatica. So if you're only running them one way, then you only would need to change it in one place. But a lot of times, you have your automation, but the sales person may want to send one off, right? And then they're getting a different template.
Yep.
So a lot of times it depends, on what the user wants. But sometimes it's easier if you point everything to the template that's inside of Acumatica.
I'm with you. Because it's so much easier to work with too, right? Like you have a nicer screen there than it is working in the report designer. Yep. I like that one. That's a good one. Quick time check. Do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour here?
No, I got a few more minutes, so I'm good till quarter after.
All right. What else do we have in here? So, I guess that is the stuff on the very bottom section.
Yeah, I think we kind of got through it, but I'd love to hear, any other ideas that you have or what you think would. Oh, there was one more topic that I didn't write down here that I thought was interesting. You tell me what you think. Have you ever created a tabular report you even know what that is in the report?
Yeah, I've tried it once or twice, but whenever I want to do that, on a lot of the stuff, I end up reaching for Power BI. So I haven't done much with it. Like, what's a good use case for you for that one?
Well, a good use case, one that I did for a customer, and you have to be careful because it's kind of like a pivot or a cross tab. I've seen it called. Your grouping can be displayed horizontally on the report. And a couple use cases for that would be for a sales report where you want to see either by salesperson or by item class in a more concise format without having to hard code each of the formulas. So you could write formulas to say, if the item class equals this, then included in this column. If the item class equals this, then included in this column. If it's this, included in this column. If you use your tabular report, then if you add another item class, it will, dynamically do that, and you'll have a lot less work on the report. You do have to be cognizant of how many columns you would expect to have, because people don't want their report to be 20 inches wide. But we have used that in some cases. It can be.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why that one does not excite me, because when I think of report designer, I think of something that's going to be printed, like something that I have a limitation on my width and my height. As soon as I get into a dynamic thinking where it's like this could expand as much as it wants, I'm going to go reach for the Acumatica pivot tables, or I'm going to do it in Excel, or I'm going to do it in Power BI. I think that's why that situation doesn't excite me personally. Like I like situations like the barcode, the sub report in a printed situation, the next, those are all like situations where I have use cases in a printed this on paper situation. For the tabular, I don't have a lot of use for that. I'd probably go the next route, because then I know I'm only limiting it to 5, and then I could have like a star or something if there's another one that wants to display. But I would use the next, because then I know it's not going to blow up on me. That's me personally.
No, that's good feedback. That's excellent feedback. Okay.
But I think you have a ton of stuff here. I think it's almost like, how are you going to cram it all in there? But to your point about just having it pre-built, or even better, just finding the examples of the out of the box ones that do this kind of stuff, I think it's a great way to do it. Then you turn it, you only have an hour. So you take it from being less of a workshop and how to do it, and more of just an educational, here's a bunch of stuff to be aware of, and you can go dig into particular things on your own. I like that in an hour format personally, just kind of this rapid fire of all these things that you already mentioned. I like that. It's just about how to get through it in an hour, but I think you could do it if you just have it all pull up the examples that you want to show. I think it's realistic.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's what's your gut feel?
I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to show a couple of canned reports, maybe the production ticket with the barcode, probably the inventory item labels to show the next function. And then maybe we'll build the example with the sub report with the sales, bookings, and invoices, and show how we can use that sub report. And
I like that one. I really do.
Maybe we'll touch on the images, styling. Yeah, we'll just cram as much in as we can. I got to make up my schedule, and I want to leave some time at the end. Hopefully we'll have questions. After the last webinar, there weren't so many questions online, and then after the webinar, I guess they found some more questions, and I got an email with about 50 more questions.
50?
What's that?
50, not 15.
There were a lot. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of questions. Chris didn't see them at the time, I guess, so they didn't get asked live. But there were a lot of questions. So I hope that it won't be too intimidating. I don't know how many registrations we have. Last time around, we maxed out at 1,000, but I'm thinking since this is intermediate, we're going to get a little less.
You had over 1,000 on the last one?
Well, that was the cap. That was all they could accept. They told me it was full. Yeah. So
wow, that's pretty fun.
Kind of fun. So I want to leave some time for questions. And, if you think of anything, Tim, or if you hear of any great use cases that you think would be good for me to include, just let me know, because it's really, point is just to show things that'll be of value to the community. So I don't really have an agenda except to try to show some useful content, Well,
I think you got it. I think the bullet points you got are great. And I just took some notes just to help you get things. My job here was sort of be like the vampire, just suck the information out of your head, to put it on some bullet points. I'll send you an email with the notes I took, just, help you have some stuff on that's written down. But one thought I do have is when you mentioned the questions, I don't know how to do this, but what I'm thinking of right now is, you go off and you do a webinar, and it's all about engagement, right? Like you want to get people engaged. And if you leave that time for questions, there's only so much you can respond to in the webinar. But there's the classic like educational setting example of, where the teacher tries to encourage you to raise your hand, because if you have that question, no one else probably has that question too.
Right.
So what I'm thinking of is there a way to somehow take the questions and make sure that they get created as community posts, right? So that they're now just regular discussion topics. And in this case, there's already a forum just for Report Designer, if I remember correctly. And it's like, instead of taking all those follow-up questions via email, make sure they get created. And maybe the simple way is you just create the question and then answer the question, because you wouldn't be able to post it. Am I making sense? Like, just
Yeah, no, I mean,
for those questions that you got people to ask,
Right. No, that's a good idea. When I got the questions after the webinar, Chris sent them to Chris Hackett. He's the community manager. He's great. And he sent me the questions in a spreadsheet. They came from the platform.
And then what did you do? Did you reply?
And then I wrote up a post, and we posted it on I think he posted.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah. Then that handles it. That handles it. All right. That does it.
Maybe
so did you do it just as
we didn't answer all of them. Some were redundant, but
like as a non-question post in the forum. Like there's two options. One's like knowledge sharing, I think, and one question, something like that.
I think it just got posted as a comment on the webinar, maybe. I don't know where it went. I should look for that. But
yeah, let's find that. I can put that on this episode page. I'm just thinking about because when you have 1,000 people on there and the questions that come out, those are valuable, and how to surface those is what I was thinking about. Yeah. Interesting. Right. Okay.
So, all right.
Well, thanks for hanging out, and hope I got some things moving for you, and looking forward to the webinar on the 21st.
All right. Thank you, Tim. It was a real pleasure, and I will talk to you again soon, I hope.
All right. Sounds good. See you, Laura.
Okay. Bye.